Call of Duty Ghosts is another game like Modern Warfare 3, where it definitely feels like there were issues behind the scenes, which unfortunately bled into the final product. Obviously, there was an extra large workload on the development team involved this time around, since this is actually the first ever Call of Duty that was developed cross-generation for two different sets of consoles. Sure, there were the Wii versions and PS2 versions of some of the other games, as well as World at War for the PS2 for some reason, but these were in many ways transformative experience, or even different games altogether. Ghosts, by contrast, was the same game on PS3 and 360 as it was on PS4 and Xbox One. For this video, I played the current generation version, which one would assume is the better version, but clearly due to the install base of the previous generation of consoles, I think they prioritized that version and then ported it forward. Initially, even on the PS4 it was stuck at 720p, which frankly kind of made it look like a mess. They eventually offered a patch that raised it up to 1080p, though graphically the game still looks last generation in many ways. I wouldn't say it looks bad, and it certainly is an improvement over the PS3/360 version, but many of the assets are much more simple than what you'd see even just a year later with Advanced Warfare. On top of this, much of the art design is incredibly standard and bland, which I would argue makes the whole package look worse than Black Ops 2 regardless of your platform of choice. Ghosts has some nice vistas and scripted wreckage moments, but otherwise it peaks when you're in unique environments, which we'll get to in a moment. The thing that makes this even more baffling is the fact that the performance is often so terrible. Even on a pro with boost mode enabled, this is by far the worst performance of any of the games so far. Later on in the campaign, there are points where it feels like it's dropping below 30 frames a second for a 60 frames per second title, and drops in general are really frequent. It not only made the game feel kind of frustrating to play at times, but it was also disappointing that things were never resolved during the year that this game was the priority. So what about the actual game then? Well, the first mission makes a decent impression, because it's fairly unique when compared to what the series has done up to this point. Fighting in zero gravity was cool, and this isn't the only time it's used, but as soon as the second mission starts, it's bland city most of the way through. Not all of the way through, but most of the way. Again, I'm someone who really values mechanical tweaks and contextual variety. Rather than giving me a new system to learn and explore for a few minutes and then dropping it for something else, give me something that integrates well with the core gameplay, which spices up what I'm already doing. Something I can fall back on regularly when it's needed. This is what separates endless shooting galleries from more interesting gunfights. It's why things like destructible cover can be entertaining. It's not transformative, it's iterative in a way that doesn't sacrifice the established gameplay depth. So the best moments in Ghosts are the ones that capitalize on this concept, like the underwater mission and the later full space mission, both of which use zero-gravity style physics to change the way you can think about approaching gunfights. There's also the flood mission, and in the mission where you infiltrate the base, I enjoyed the fact that you can shoot the ice to stop enemy vehicles during the escape. There's also a pretty decently cool tank section near the end, where you have a lot of control and freedom, though it's over too quickly. My favorite mission, though, is definitely the skyscraper bit. It's not a particularly fresh or complex mission, but the aesthetic and level design as well as the pacing were just my style, and it gave me the feeling that it was more freeform than it actually is. All that being said, much of the time the game is just bog standard shootouts. It also tries to spice these up with the type of little iterative bits I said I enjoy, but not only are these incredibly brief and not freely usable by the player, but usually they're just tricks that make you feel overpowered for a short time. Examples would be the points where they shut the lights off and you use night vision, or a similar section where the exact same idea is instead done with smoke grenades and thermal goggles. Ooh. These types of ideas are much better when they take some of your advantages away, forcing you to alter the way you play, like the swaying train section at the end. Beyond set pieces and level design, there are a handful of other new mechanical ideas. Two of the most organic in theory are the contextual lean and the slide. Black Ops 1 was the first game to introduce an alternative to crouching or going prone, with the dive. Black Ops 2 carried this same dive forward. Ghosts allows the player to slide, which can be a quick way to do things like get to cover or assault an enemy with a shotgun. By now, you know how things go with Ghosts though. Neither of these mechanics are as polished as they should be. In my experience, the lean is fine, but I greatly disliked the fact that I usually had to be looking at the wall in order to activate it. Part of the point is that I'm trying to ready my pre-aim so that I can stop and pop from safety, but when I have to shift my aim from looking at a wall to aiming at my actual target as soon as I lean, that defeats the purpose. This is a good idea for a mechanic, but it can be improved quite a bit. The slide, meanwhile, is another fantastic addition in theory, but in practice it's incredibly slow, short, and feels more awkward than useful. Many shooters these days use slides, so we know it can work, but Ghosts is one of the least successful versions of the slide that I've experienced. Again, though, it can be improved. The only other big addition is playing as the dog, Riley. It's fine, but it's not really anything special. Completely forgettable, really, because it's once again barely used in any interesting ways. Flinch is also back to pre-Black Ops 2 levels of awful. Enemies once again drop into Last Stand all the time. I didn't have that much of an issue with the infinitely respawning enemies, nor explosives, thankfully. And despite these issues, I barely died throughout the entire game. It was significantly easier than the others. I think it's because the enemies in this game love to try and retreat as you move forward. This creates a bit of a catch-22 for them, where I'll move forward, they'll try to retreat, which leaves them wide open for gunfire, so I'll gun them down, which creates an opening to move forward, and the cycle repeats. While this is what I would consider an issue for sure, it's still not a personal complaint. Boring as it may be, it was far better than the AI being obnoxiously annoying. Clearly, they wanted to do more with Ghosts. Heck, they even obviously wanted to make sequels considering the ending. I actually like the idea of a sequel pitting the two brothers against each other because one of them has been brainwashed or whatever, but ultimately this never came to be. And despite slight interest in that concept, the rest of Ghosts is so boring that I'm not upset whatsoever that it'll never happen. Well, I'd still definitely argue that World at War is the weakest game we've looked at so far, and Ghosts is another short game at around the 4-hour mark, meaning it's not a huge investment to play through. It's once again also a game that I simply wouldn't recommend playing through unless you really need more Call of Duty in your life. I would recommend trying the underwater mission, the flood mission, and the skyscraper mission though, but outside of that, skip this one.